Hello, everyone. We want to thank everybody for joining us today for our Emory Compass Coordinating Center webinar. We have participants that are still coming in. So we're just going to give this a few more minutes just to allow people just to log on and to join us today. And if you don't mind, put in your chat and let us know what organization that you are representing today. And so we can just get a feel for what organizations we have in the room. Hey, we got Chris from Alpha. Hey, Chris, it's always good to see you. We hope everything is going well. Okay. We have I'm not even going to pronounce that because I don't want to mess up anybody's organization name, but it looked like Diana Cares, and it probably is wrong. So please, Bree, forgive me for mispronouncing the name of your organization. I am so sorry. We have Becky at Fire Rings Financial that's on with us. Hello, Becky. It's good to see you joining us this morning. Thank you all. We have Jose. Hey, Jose from Latino Commission on AIDS. It's always good to see you all too. Okay, great. All right, so we're gonna have a nice intimate group today. So that is absolutely awesome because that'll help us so we can have some really candid conversation as we go through today's webinar. All right, it's 11:03 right now, and we're just gonna give a couple more seconds just to let a couple of people just log on. Okay. All right, great. All right, so we're just gonna go ahead and get started. Once again, we want to thank everyone for taking our time out of their day in order to join us for today's webinar. Today's webinar is being brought to you by the Emory Compass Coordinating Center. And the name of today's webinar is Return to Business as Usual, Planning Strategies for Workplace Reentry. And today we are going to be talking about a couple of things that are really on everyone's agenda. As we look to reopening our doors in the midst of still dealing with COVID. COVID is not over, so we don't want to give that impression, but our states are opening. If not all states are not open right now, majority of the states are open right now. So I know a lot of organizations are reopening their doors to their staff and to community. So we just want to partner with you all and offering some strategies, just some considerations for you all to think about. As you're looking to see how you can put some things into place to make sure people are safe, and then you're also able to be responsive to community as much as possible. So for today's agenda, we had just a couple of items that we're going to make sure that we touch base on. One is looking at the different types of workplace reentry, the phases that you can break down the strategies into for reentering the workplace. We also have some templates and some resources that we're going to be sharing with you. And we also going to talk about the capacity building assistance that's available to all organizations that's in the Deep South that are HIV focused organization. And then we're also going to have a little bit of Q&A. But keep in mind that you all can put questions in the chat at any point in time. So if you all have questions that come up, as we go through some of the content, please feel free and put those in the chat. We'll be monitoring that chat throughout, so we're able to capture those questions. So you don't have to wait to the end of the webinar in order to ask or give any type of comments. And also, if you all have anything you all want to share as we go through different strategies, practices that you all already put in place that you find that are working, please share. We want this to be a space where you all are able to share openly with the other organizations that's on the line, so people can get other ideas or be motivated to think about other solutions or other ideas that they may not have thought about, or maybe answer some questions that they're pondering that you all may already have an answer to. So please feel open to share as much as possible as we go through the webinar. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about first is talk about the workplace reentry phases. And those phases right now are being broken down into 4 distinct areas. Now, some of the content that we're going to go through is pretty much things that we have gathered from different experts in the field, different consultants that are doing this work with different organizations, things that have been posted and have been lightly researched by organizations such as the National Nonprofit Human Resources, the National Coalition for Nonprofit Associations, different HIV-led, HIV-focused organizations, the CDC. So it's a mixture of what other people have come up with based on the work they've been doing with organizations and what organizations have shared to be some of the practices that they have been putting in place. But keep in mind that we are in a place where we are in uncharted territory. So we don't have the definite answers. So these are strategies that we are going to be sharing with you all that we have found to be something that is being utilized majority amongst nonprofits, but it's not found it to be the end all be all way in order to make sure your staff and community are completely safe from COVID-19, or this is the best and this is the most proven strategy in order to make sure that your organization is in a good positive space. When it comes down to reopening, these are strategies that we're hoping that you all can consider. But if, like I said before, if you all have other considerations that you think are also imperative for organization to take to heart, please share those things in your chat. Because again, we are in charted territory, so still that these are just recommendations. These are not just the end all be all. What we know is definitely going to work. We won't know what is definitely going to be best practice until we really get to the other side of this, which is the scary part. But at least we are in a place where we are supporting each other, and we're going to try and true as many options as possible in order for people to at least know that they have a list of options and it's just not one way of doing things. There are different options that everyone can try to figure out and adopt and employ at their organizations. And we also know that all organizations are not a monolith. Everyone is different. So again, for these things may work perfectly for you all. And some of the things you may look at and it's like, yeah, that would not work at all. And if that is the case, that's absolutely okay. But again, share what you all have come up with that may not be mentioned throughout this webinar in the chat. And then we'll get to, when we get to the end, if you see there are things that we recommend and you're like, oh, I think that would be absolutely great, but we need a little bit more support on how to put that in place. And you need some TA and some training or some consultation around it. We're more than happy in order to support you around those kinds of requests. As most of you know, that has worked with Emory and the other CCs, we are able to provide training and consultations and support as much as possible. So if it's something stands out or sticks out to you, please let us know. And if you need some additional support around it, again, we're more than happy to support you. So again, so some of the re-entry types that people are right now looking at is one, it's returning to physical workplace. To the physical workplace. So that means that people are now looking at one of the re-entry types is going back into work full throttle, that all staff is coming back to be in the physical workspace. The other is returning to a hybrid of telework and physical work, whereas people are returning to, with some of their staff still working remotely, and then some of their staff being in the physical workplace. Some people have maintained this hybrid throughout the entire pandemic, is working in a hybrid format, whereas some people are working remotely and then some people are still in the office space because those folks could not come out of the workspace due to the fact that they were maybe medical staff or provided some type of health services to community, or maybe they were financial staff and they had to always stay in the physical workspace. So some people are still working to that, and then some people are joining back or returning to a hybrid of that. The other is return from shutdown, whereas some organizations were completely shut down. There was no one in the office. Some people completely shut down. It wasn't teleworking either. Where all business was completely halted for a couple of months. So some people are in that space. And then the others is recalling employees. And those are the folks that were shut down and they're bringing employees back into their workspace, and some people were furloughed or laid off, and they are calling those people back to work and putting them back on staff. So it's so many different aspects of it. But what we found from, like I said, from the research that we've done and from working with different organizations, these are the primary 4 types of reentry that people are dealing with right now. So with returning to work, there's a lot of pre-return planning considerations that is required right now. So one is broken down into different types of concerns. So we're looking at external considerations, internal considerations, employee concerns, legal concerns, and then physical space and protocols. And we identified those things as the primary areas that everyone is pretty much looking at when they're thinking about planning and coming up with strategies in order to return. What are some of our kind of focus areas that we need to be focused, kind of coordinating around? So with external considerations is making sure, of course, that you're in compliance with federal, state, and local orders. Has your state opened up fully? Have they said that everyone can open up their doors right now? Is it done with some restrictions where everyone has to be practicing the social distancing, using PPE, that kind of thing? So external considerations would be those. Internal considerations is who do we consider essential to working on site? This is a big thing with a lot of organizations, especially organizations that provide services directly to community. Who do we deem as essential as working on site? So is it everyone that does testing? Is it everyone that does case management? Is that everyone who works in HR because they need to deal with staffing? Who exactly are our essential work on site employees? So it has been a lot of conversation and dialogue around what does essential mean? Who identifies within being essential, and being careful about how we utilize that terminology, because of the simple fact that we know that usually who we identify as essential is not always people who are in leadership. So being really careful about who we say who are essential people, and then what risk are those people taking by returning to work and being essential employees. So being mindful about who we identify as essential and needing to be working on site. Other considerations is, does your current financial situation impact our decision to bring people back? We're going to get into that in the next couple of slides when we think about the cost implications about returning to work and opening our doors, because of the simple fact that the financial aspect of it is really imperative, because of the preparation that you have to put in place has a cost associated with it. It's also a cost associated with bringing back employees that we just talked about. Is one of those phases is returning people that may have been furloughed or laid off. So now you're bringing those folks back. So that means that you're going to have to start back doing payroll, and you may not be doing payroll for a couple of months. Now it's reactivating payroll or paying extra to folks who's coming back because of the fact that they are taking some increased risk. Some people are implementing things like hero pay, more pay when it comes down to health insurance and health care. So it's a lot of financial considerations, and not just financial considerations for the staff, but also for employees when they think about having to pay for childcare and things of that nature. So it's a lot of financial aspects that have to be considered. The other is, will immune compromised persons feel safe returning as staff in this community needing to access services? So do those folks who need to come in for services, that need to come in for case management, that need housing, that need any type of mental health counseling or any type of counseling or support, do they feel safe coming back into your organization once your doors have reopened, if they were ever closed or those services were limited or put on a as needed basis? So do those people feel safe coming into your space as well? And then other concerns is, like I already mentioned, employees have concern around childcare issues. We're here in Georgia, and a lot of summer programs are just not opening. And so kids are still at home. So round the clock childcare is from that of the parent or the caregiver that's at home. So being able to find an alternative form of childcare is a hardship. Or they may be at home taking care of someone who may have dealing with any type of illness or any healthcare challenges as well. So that's a concern of the employees. And then legal concerns is, what policies do we need to update or develop relative reentry, such as travel, social distancing, employee leave, work hours. So all those things that you come up with that we must keep in mind is that whatever you come up with as far as what your procedures are going to be, have to be put into your policies. And that's going to be really, really important. And that's one reason why HR is such an imperative part of your pre-return planning considerations. It's because whatever you put in place, it will need to be put in some type of protocol, formal protocol, or into your policies. And that is just to make sure that your organization is covered, one, and that also when you are making your staff aware of what your procedures are, that they have a policy in place that they can refer back to that really formalizes what the precautions are going to be within your organization once they return to work. And then the other is physical space and protocols. And that's figuring out, can't we provide enough PPE, or are we going to require PPE to be utilized at the organizations once people return to the workspace? Is everyone going to have to wear a face mask? Is everyone going to practice social distancing? Are we going to require that not only for our staff, but also require that for community? And if so, are we going to provide that PPE to people, or are we going to leave that to be up to them to provide it for themselves? So those things are really, really important. And there's just a few other considerations that I know folks are thinking about. But if there are other considerations that you all are thinking about right now, you can put those into the chat, because you just, we know we did is an exhaustive list, and there's other things that we probably have not captured. These are just a couple of like highlighted things, but if there's other considerations that people are having, like I said before, please feel free to put those things into the chat. And so we can make sure that we collect all that data, and then we'll be able to share it with other people once we send out all the resources. So we're going to get into returning to work phase 1, and that's workplace open for essential employees. And with this, we're going to go to phase 1 and just thinking about the preparation aspect of it. So with preparation, we have a list of things listed on the screen that talk about some of the things that are usually typically being thought about when it comes down to the initial preparation of phase 1 of reopening. And I'm hoping that people are kind of taking things into phases and not just kind of jumping in both feet first, because again, this is uncharted territory. So you want to give yourself some time to ease into reopening your doors, so you kind of are not bombarded with a lot of issues and unforeseen issues at one time, that you can kind of take your time so you can assess what's working, what's not working. If something happens, you can kind of you have the opportunity to respond to it in a way that helps you not get overwhelmed. Folks are already overwhelmed, so we don't want to overwhelm ourselves even more. So some of the preparation that we put up, that we thought about, and that we look to as being some of the primary things that people are doing, organizations are doing, is one is a staff readiness survey. And I'm gonna go to the next screen real quickly and then return back to this one to show you exactly what a staff readiness survey would entail. So a staff readiness survey would include things like asking staff just generally questions just to make sure they're kind of aware. One question could be, I was recently updated on organizational health and safety policies and procedures that have been put in place. Again, we talked about the considerations and the things that you all want to put in place as far as procedures and protocols, putting those into a policy, and then making sure that staff is aware of those policies and procedures, and they have been trained on it, they've been aware of it, in some type of way they've been made aware. So one survey question could be, they've been updated and they're aware of what the policies are. One is, I was informed about what is expected of me in maintaining a healthy and safe environment. So such as practicing social distancing, making sure I'm wearing PPE, that kind of thing. I am comfortable returning to my work site. This is really important to survey, because then you are able to get an idea of how many people actually want to come back into the physical office. If you say we're just gonna open the doors and let 50%, 40% of our staff in, but over half of those folks that you're calling back into the office are not comfortable coming back into the office, that can create a space of anxiety, a lot of tension, or people calling out and wanting to take more leave time because they don't feel comfortable coming back. So that is important. So that can inform your timeline and when you're saying people need to be back. If 40% of the people that we're saying need to come back are not comfortable coming back, do you need to change your timeline as far as opening your doors for on-site people to come back? If you know you're going to be dealing with majority of them not coming in the first place. So that's a really important thing because that can inform what your timeline needs to be. And maybe it may need to be a more conversation in reinforcing the safety precautions you all have to put into place in order to make sure that when staff do return to the office, that they are in a space where that all precautions have been taken. So it may be a need to reiterate what you all have done as far as steps to make sure that staff are safe once they return to your space. Another is I am comfortable traveling for work if required. A lot of people are just not traveling at all. Of course, you can still fly, you can still drive, and then some people have to travel. We have one organization in Mississippi that's a case, and they have it's a HIV serving organization, and they have a case manager that travels throughout the counties that they serve. And she physically has to go and work with different clients and provide TA to different health departments and things like that. So her travel is attached to her job. So what that needs to look like is something that they are making a lot of considerations around. So is traveling for work required? For some people, it is required because like I said before, mobile units, they travel around to different rural areas to make sure that people have access to needle exchange programs, to testing, to receiving different type of medical services. So travel is sometimes a requirement and something that you can't get around. But can you minimize the travel in any kind of way? That is the things that have to be considered. Does the travel have to be as much as it was pre-COVID, or is there modifications that can be made, and what do those modifications look like? But that is a key question in order to ask once again, because again, that can inform your timeline as far as when you're putting certain things in place as a requirement, and then some things that you're going to make optional. The other is I'm comfortable commuting via public transit to work. Some people are on public transit systems, and those things can be really, really a large challenge for folks, because in public transit systems, you can only protect yourself so much. And then you have someone who's traveling on public transit system, and now they're coming to work after they are being exposed to a wide community of folks who may or may not be practicing any type of safety precautions on the public transit systems. So then you have those folks coming into work. So that's something else to consider as well, because if someone has to utilize public transit in order to get to work, would you rather for that person to continue to telework because you know the risk that's involved by them being on a public transit system? Also, we have community that utilizes public transit in order to get and access services. So that's another consideration too. So it becomes a thing of, you don't want to limit travel, but then you don't want to have community also utilizing public transit system to access your services. So is it safer, or can you control exposure more by having staff travel more to those spaces where you know clients are in need of? So it's really a balancing act, and there's a lot of hard decisions that have to be made. Another question to ask is, I would prefer to work from home if that option is extended to me. Some people are working from home and it has worked out really, really well for them, whereas they don't have to worry about public transportation. They don't have to worry about childcare. The worry of being exposed is limited and they're a little bit more protected because they're at home. So they know who they are around. They can control the environment a lot more. They know they won't be exposed because they've been at home for a certain amount of time. So they already know what that space is, so they're comfortable there. So it's a consideration for leadership to think about. If someone is already working at home and it's working out perfectly, it's not absolutely a dire need for them to be in a space, or at least they don't have to be in a space 5 days a week. Can they continue to stay at home? And for those people, those are considerations for leadership to really ponder, that do we have to bring people back if it's already working out with them working from home? And then another question that you can put on a survey is, how can an organization best support you in transitioning back to work? And when we ask that question, we leave that as an open-ended question. Why you see open text on there is so you don't have to get into asking direct questions, such as, do you have a child care issue? Do you have staff? Do you have family members that have any type of medical conditions or immune compromise or have been exposed to COVID? Do you have any type of health conditions that will put you susceptible to contracting COVID? So instead of asking those questions, asking open-ended questions and allowing people to share what they feel comfortable sharing is more preferable than asking those direct questions, because we don't want to invade upon someone else's privacy. So asking open-ended questions is always a positive thing. So you can get it, because you may end up getting more information than you would have gotten if you asked something that was more direct. But again, when you get these slides, you'll see that there's a link to a template to a survey that you can utilize. It has questions on there that you can utilize, and or it's a link and you can just utilize the survey that they have. So that is a resource that is a part of, that's going to be part of resources that we're going to send out. Another thing is around preparation is reactivation or expansion of services. So for instance, with testing, some organizations are just doing testing 3 days a week for a certain amount of time, from just for example, from 8 to 12. Are you going to continue to keep those limited times, or are you going to expand it? Or you're going to some people have completely shut down all services, and so are you going to reactivate those things? So some people have to come in and get tested. So are we going to figure out a way in order for folks to come in to get tested, or limit how many people can come in at one time? So another thing around preparation is to stagger work schedules, such as allowing folks to come in from maybe 7 to 3 or 7 to 12, and then other staff to come in from 12 to 5 o'clock or 12 to 6. So some people to work to 3 to 6. So you won't have everyone in the space at the same time. Also, office layout modifications are imperative, and I'm gonna go down and give you an example of what office layout modifications would look like. So workplace layout modifications would include rearranging as much as your office space as possible. Now, for some people who have individual offices, works out really well because you can kind of maintain that space a lot better. But when it's come down to shared space, can you put things into place such as cubicles, making sure that maybe the walls are higher, turning desks away from each other instead of desks facing each other, installing dividers in between workstations, putting markers down on the floors in order to demonstrate where they're 6 feet apart, taking out chairs out of your conference rooms, out of your shared space, such as with where you have your lunchroom or your small kitchenettes that you have, taking out chairs out of there so we know that people won't go in there to sit down and to congregate, adding sanitation stations to your desk, to different places around your office. But also, that's also a budget consideration because those things cost money in order to put some of those things into place. But little things that you can do is taking some of the desk out, turning desks so they are not facing each other, so people are not looking directly at each other. And then also, a lot of people are invested. So part of the PPE that people are purchasing is the sanitation stations that people are trying to put on each person's station. And then also other workplace modifications by staggering work schedules that helps with sanitizing the space. So if you know that you're going to have about 10 staff is going to be there from 7 to 3, and then the other staff is going to come in, they're going to work a later shift, then that allows you the opportunity to clean the space before that next shift comes in. So that kind of helps with sanitization schedules and making sure that people are just not exposed to the staff that was there beforehand. Immediate policy modifications that need to be made. These are preparations that need to be happening during phase 1. Policy modifications need to happen during this phase, so you are kind of like ahead of the 8 ball. But you can make additional modifications as you go through phase 1 of reopening finding out what's working, what's not, and then you can make those updates to the policy. But it's important, it's imperative to start making those policy modifications right now and not later. You want to go ahead and have your policies and procedures already in place. If you need support around what those policies and procedures need to be and how they need to look like, we're going to have a couple of examples later on in the show, and again, later on in the webinar. And then, like I said, we're here to provide you with any TA support around it. Modifications to deliveries and visitations. Sometimes before COVID, we allowed deliveries to come in and out to our space. There was never no restrictions. But the good thing is that deliveries like at FedEx, UPS, the Postal Service, they are already adopted more safety measures as far as what they need to do when it comes down to dropping off packages. So instead of coming in, bringing in packages, they're dropping them off at your door. And with modifications with that, it's just making sure that deliveries are not coming into the office, and that you can limit how many people are coming in and out of the office. The other part is visitation. So a lot of people have a lot of visitors that come for meetings or to do site visits and things like that. So it's a question of, are you going to continue to have visitations during phase 1, or are you going to allow visitation to go through phase 2? So with phase 1, it's really a question of what are the definite things that you want to make sure happen in your office. You want to make sure testing is happening. You want to make sure case management is happening. You want to make sure that policy and procedures are being put in place. And so therefore you need HR to be present. So what are the definite things that you need to happen in phase 1? So it really is prioritizing what you want to happen in your office. You don't have to open the office full-fledged and have your office manager there and everyone present. You can have whomever you think is necessary for the phase 1 of reopening your office, and then make modifications based on this one group. It's almost having like your first group kind of is your group that you kind of test out what's working with our policy and procedure, what's working and what's not working with our safety measures, and what's working, what's not working as far as making a determination. Staff that definitely need to be in a space and staff that doesn't need to be in a space. But some organizations, we found that some people want to come back to work. Some people want to be back in their workspace. Some people are not comfortable always being at home all of the time. And that can be for a myriad of reasons. It could be a safety issue with that they don't want to be at home. It could be the fact that they don't have a lot of resources at the house, whereas the internet is not as strong. They don't have as much, the technology is not as available. There's some things they just got to do and they must have it in the office. And some people just like to have a connection with their staff, especially for small staff. They have like a really tight-knit relationship. And some people are just zoomed out. They don't want to do any more online meetings, no more Zoom meetings. They're like, let's get back into the space and get back to some sense of normalcy. So everyone is feeling different. That's why that staff readiness survey is so imperative, is because it would tell you the story of where your staff is. And that would inform exactly what your preparation really needs to be around bringing people back into the workspace. Some of the cost implications that I've already mentioned is PPE. PPE can be really expensive because this next gen, I'm talking about face masks, it's all we're talking about sanitizer, this all talking about gloves, it's talking about a myriad of different things that goes into making sure you have personal protective equipment available. But you're not only just having it for the staff, but you're also having it for community. So you're gonna be purchasing all those things. That's a cost implication that you also need to look at your budget around. Can you afford to buy that much stuff? So that determines how many people that you're going to have in that space. Because if I have to buy PPE for every staff member that's going to be present and every community person that comes in for services, and we have to have PPE for everyone, then that's a cost that we're going to acquire. So that determines how open do you want to be through phase 1. We may want to be open only 3 days a week because we can't afford to have that much PPE for 5 days a week. So that is it's a huge cost to take into consideration. The other is phase 1 preparation has its costs associated with, like I said before, costs associated with modifying your workspace, having to buy additional things for everybody's desk, buying dividers for everyone's desk, having someone come in and clean the office, twice a day instead of once a week or once every couple of days. That's another cost that's associated with it. Paying for space, and then paying for things like utilities. That's a cost. Your office has been closed for 2 months. You haven't having to pay utilities. Costs may have gone down a little bit. So then when you bring people back, that cost is added back to you. Is added back to your budget. That's another thing to think about. That will inform how open do you want to be for phase one of your reopening the workspace. Another cost is loss of revenue. A lot of people have had cancellation of fundraisers, cancellation of trainings that would have generated some income, services that were prohibited and that prohibited you from billing insurance and Medicaid and things like that. That was a loss of revenue. Because of that, and people want to start generating that cost, generating those funds again, they want to open up those types of services so they can start billing again, insurance and Medicaid and things like that. So because of that, that becomes on your priority list. Like I said before, what exactly do we need to get open and running right now as it relates to our bottom line? Do we need to start back doing case management work and things like that so we can start billing again, so we can start generating revenue once again? So that means that our case managers need to come in. Those are the first people that we need to have back in here. So therefore, who can we say not be in the space? So case managers, when they come, they can practice social distancing. They can have majority of the space and don't have to worry about sharing space with people who essentially really don't have to be here while the case manager is working. So it's having those kind of conversations and prioritizing what your phase one needs to look like. The other part is digital media and technology. Paying for additional laptops for people to work from home, that's another cost associated with it. But also digital media and technology has taken over right now. So therefore that's another cost, because you got to think about additional money that's going to go into information security. When we're thinking about people working from home, and you're going to think about making that more long-term is going to, long-term work from home is going to require you to have more technology security because of files being shared and things like that. So that may be some increase in paying for IT services to make sure that your information is being protected and that you're utilizing more shared databases so that information can be shared more seamlessly amongst staff. If you're looking at making in a more hybrid model where people are all working from home and working in the workspace, or looking more long-term and more people are going to start working from home. Or it could be that as you assess phase one of people coming into work and you just really want to keep the people who do direct services in that space so they can work with the community and keep people who do like more administrative work at home, then that is going to, it may cost you just a little bit more as far as paying for and investing in digital media and in technology, online media platforms. So that means that you're going to have to invest in more of a more robust Zoom platform. I'm going to have to invest in more laptops. And again, invest in more increased information security. So that's one thing to take into consideration. The other is early termination of building lease or paying for unoccupied space. So having to pay for a space that no one has been in for 2 months is another loss of revenue. That money has been gone out to pay for my building lease and no one has been occupying the space for 2 months. Or no one's going to occupy the space for 4 to 5 months and we still have to pay the building lease. Or does it make more sense to terminate the building? Some people, some organization that we work with is buying bigger space in order for them to practice social distancing so that the space is not so congested, paying for space that allows a lot more room. So you can have this space that's dedicated for this, and this is dedicated for administrative purposes. And so you can be able to maneuver in a way that allows there to be more social distancing and for you to house more staff at once instead of having like these really skeleton crews kind of coming in and working. So those are a lot of cost implications. And those are just a few things that we came up with. So we don't want to think about phase one, let the essential workers coming in, but not think about the cost that's associated with it. Because again, that will inform who comes in, what services definitely needs to be put back on a 3 to 5 day work cycle. And then what are the things that can absolutely wait? or maybe a more of a 6-month slow reentry. So all those things help inform what your decisions need to be. The other is a COVID-19 coordinated response team that is imperative for every organization to have. Um, Everyone that we've done, that we've looked at through research, whether it's a small nonprofit, grassroots organizations, hospitals, large nonprofits, COVID-19 coordinated response teams are something that is a practice that's being utilized by all those entities. One is because everyone has a different job when it comes down to how you do response around this team. It could be a team of 2, it could be a team of 20. It doesn't matter. As long as you have some people that are designated to deal with what the response needs to be around your organization. So those people can include human resources, someone from operations, facilities management, communications and technology, or organization leaders and managers. And that would be someone from direct services, someone that deals with your programs, someone that's administrative. It can also include one of your board members, because board members have been really instrumental throughout this process, because board members have been really essential to the conversation around fundraising, making sure that we're getting things out to community, what we need to the other other board members, how we communicate with funders. Board members have been really instrumental in facilitating that conversation. So they may be a really important person to have part of your COVID-19 coordinated response team. But just don't think about this as a COVID-19 coordinated response team only. Is because we don't know what is to happen down the road. So I would strongly recommend, if you have this response team in place, or you're going to put this response team in place, to maintain them as a part of your organization, because it may not be a COVID-19 in a couple of months. It may turn into your emergency response team, your crisis response team. That name can change into something else, because having some type of team that is in place already to go, and that's already pondered all these considerations and thought about protocols and policies that needs to happen in place when things like this happen, is important. Before this happened, typically we did not have a response team, an emergency response team, a crisis response team in place. We had some policies and procedures, and we talk about what ifs, but that was never on everyone's primary agenda. It's to talk about what happens in the time of crisis. What would we all do? What would we do if we had to shut down operations altogether? What would we all do if we had a pandemic? But for those of us that's also dealt with natural disasters, what do we do in times of natural disasters such as hurricanes and tornadoes and things like that? Because you just never know what happens when things happen outside of our control. How is that going to impact our organization? And then how are we going to respond to make sure our organization can stabilize itself in the midst of that? So I will hope that with you putting a COVID-19 coordinated response team together, that you maintain this team, and this becomes a best practice for your organization that is maintained. And maybe that name, like I said before, evolves into something else, like a crisis response team or emergency response team, or whatever the case may be, because these people are essential. There are probably other folks that you can add to this team that I have not mentioned. So these people are just, so who needs to be on there primarily, foundationally. If you add more folks, that's absolutely great. But at the end of the day, please make sure that these people are present. That's your HR person. You need your HR person because of the fact they deal with policies, procedures, onboarding, new staff. They are aware of all the laws that go along with different things around protection, payroll, paycheck protection programs, and things of that nature. Operations are imperative because operations pretty much deals with anything that's dealing with anything administrative. Facilities management, when we talked about you modifying your workspace, facilities management is imperative around that. If you have that, that part of your staff. Communications, of course, you need folks who's going to make sure that community knows what's going on your websites, on your Facebook page, on your Instagram page, making sure that whatever is an announcement or updates going on with your organization, when you're going to start back doing testing, when your doors are going to start back opening, what your statements are around COVID, that those communications are going out on your website and on your social media platforms. And then your organizational leaders, those people can always speak to what's going on in each department. I can give you updates on what is going to actually work for people who do direct services. But we don't want to say these are what our policies and procedures are, but that's not going to work for direct services people. Those policies and procedures are not going to work well with people who do programming. Those policies and procedures are not going to work for people who work from an administrative perspective. So all those people are really impaired at being at the table, so that whatever you all come up with is done so in a coordinated way, so every voice in every department that you have at your organization is being represented. Okay, so returning to work in phase 2. So in phase two is really dedicated to assessment of phase 1. What worked? And we also want to think about doing an assessment, at least allowing yourself to have at least 3 to 4 weeks of phase 1 before you jump into phase 2. And that is, again, to allow yourself to assess what worked and didn't work. So you can say, we brought all these people back and we open up services and we are seeing the public again, and we put all these social distancing, and everyone got PPE and so on and so forth. And we say, this has been working. We may want to stay here. We just want to keep these amount of people in the office. We want to keep these hours open for services. We want to stay in this space. We want to stay here for at least maybe 3 to 4 months. That assessment of phase 1 will help you make that determination. So that will inform what phase 2 really needs to look like. Now, typically phase 2 is just you will increase on-site employees. You determine if you're going to start taking walk-ins at that point, and on-site services. You'll survey employees and you do your policy updates. But honestly, phase 2 is really determining how much of phase 1 worked and how much of phase 1 you're going to keep, and assessing what the timeline is for phase 1. Are we going to extend it and continue to do what we saw was working in phase 1 for a little while longer before we allow more people to start coming into work, or not? So I would really encourage you all in phase 2, let phase 2 really inform you how much of phase 1 you're going to keep and how much of that you're not going to keep, and to stay there. I would not add more to your plate in phase 2, or feel like phase 2 needs to be you adding more to your plate in phase 2. Just because it's phase 2 don't mean that I got to open it up more. I got to increase the hours that people are working. I don't have to stagger my workspace anymore. I don't have to practice all the things that I put into place in phase 1. You're not rushed to do anything. You can want to do things according to your own timeline and your own capacity that you're able to do. Because a lot of folks are going to find out in phase 1, when they start bringing back employees, that they are working with less staff than they had before, due to the fact that some people had to be laid off. So phase 1 may last longer than anticipated, because you're working with limited staff anyway. So the other thing that we wanted to make sure that at least is done as you ease into phase 2 is that you start capturing the narrative of what your experience has been with your reopening. That's imperative, because we are getting into, there are grants that's open right now that that you can apply for to help offset some costs that have been assumed because of COVID. And then it's going to be grants that's going to be opening, and a lot of those grants that's going to be coming available in the next couple of months or so are going to be asking questions around COVID. And you need to have what your narrative is going to be to put in those grants. You need to be able to tell the story of how your organization has been impacted, how you've triumphed, and also what the challenges have also been. You need to be collecting those narratives now, not when the grant is ready to be written. Collect all the data as much as possible right now, so you can tell your story to funders, to donors, to any type of foundations. You need to be able to tell those stories. Also, if, Lord forbid, if this goes longer or this gets worse, which we're hoping will not happen, you need to be able to know exactly what your ask needs to be to your board and to your funders. Because you already have been through this and you have collected all this data, then you know what to ask for, what you're going to need, and then what is necessary in order to stabilize your organization if this continues to drag on for another 6-7 months or a year. So we need to know what those things are. Collective data as much as possible. If you don't do if phase 2 is nothing more than collecting data, then let that phase 2 be that. Collecting as much data and collecting the stories as much as possible. Those things are really, really, really important. As they survey your employees. We're not asking you to send out surveys every 5 minutes, but we want to make sure that you're always collecting the voice and the concerns of your staff to make sure that their voice is always centered and that what's happening in your community is always centered. So whatever you all come up with is always done at the safety of your staff in the community that you're serving. So policy update areas that are imperative right now is updating your policy around leave, attendance. Attendance is going to look a lot different, whereas we say everyone's need to be here 8 to 5, 5 days a week, so on and so forth, Monday to Friday. Attendance may not look like that anymore. Attendance may be, attendance just being, make sure you work in the office at least 10 hours a week, not 40. So attendance is going to look different. So those things need to be updated. Work hours, your travel policy, IT use, remote work, all these things are going to require, these are like the primary areas around your policy that really needs to be updated as it relates to COVID. But not just as it relates to COVID, this is for policy updates that need to happen in generally around just crisis management, any type of unforeseen events, and any type of public health crisis that happens in this country. So this is just not you doing this for COVID. This is for something, for updates to make to your policy, period. Those things just need to be done because in order to stay ahead of the curve as much as possible. So just don't think about we need to just utilize a lot of COVID language. We just need to have language in our policies that allows us, so things like this happen, unforeseen things like this happen. We already have policy and procedures in place that allows us to be flexible with our staff and with our services when the time comes, where we're not just trying to figure it out at the last minute, that we have hit a lot of bumps in the road along the way. We're trying to figure this out. Take time to assess those things that you figured out. We are not ready to deal with anything of this magnitude hitting our organizations. I wish I had this in place. I wish I would have had this policy in place. I wish I have had X, Y, and Z in place. Those are a lot of the aha moments that organizations are having right now. Please put those things in your policy right now. Do not wait. Please put those things. That's why that coordinated response team is so important, because they help identify those things and how to employ them and make them sustainable in your organizations. It'll make things make you breathe a little bit easier, knowing that you have a lot of things like that in place. I will also encourage you that if you all have any type of legal representation, a lawyer, a employment lawyer, or anything like that, to please utilize those people. But if you don't have those folks and you want to know what you need to be put in place, utilize the TA that Emory provides. We can provide you with support around what those policies need to look like, what is the language that needs to go in there, how it needs to what it needs to say. We can provide you with that support. So you're not out there by yourself. We are more than happy to help you with making those modifications, making those updates as much as possible. Things around your technology policy. These are just a couple of things to consider. So warranties, receipts for computers and peripherals. So I know that a lot of people have invested a lot in buying laptops and buying cameras, laptop cameras to go for people to Skype or to do Zooms, because every laptop doesn't come with a built-in camera. So a lot of people have spent a lot of money in those things. A lot of people have spent money in routers, increasing their internet. A lot of people have spent a lot of money on those things. So therefore, maintain some type of policy around those warranties and those receipts being kept in a safe space, access to IT. Does your staff have access to your IT support? Can they take their stuff to Best Buy? Would that be a cost that they will have to assume? Can they call the IT person that you have contracted, or does it have to go through another person in order to get this IT, to get things troubleshooted? If you're going to be looking at a hybrid model of people working from home and the people working in the office, then those people working from home are going to at some point need a lot of IT support. So that is a key consideration as you think about extending how long someone is going to be working from home. If this is going to go to the end of the year, IT support is going to be imperative. Information about where, how, and how frequently your data is stored and backed up. Again, if you're going to be working from home and this has become like a standard for your office, then having a shared drive, like cloud-based, Google Docs, utilizing bots, making sure the information is being backed up is important. Of course, we are hoping that everyone is storing everything on their laptops, but if you don't have a policy that requires that to happen, then that can be a maybe. We're not sure things are being backed up and saved, but having something in your policy that makes that a requirement helps a whole lot. And making sure that you're changing outgoing emails and voicemails to reflect any changes or organizational services. We don't want you all to open up your doors and no one knows that your doors are open. We want to make sure that communication modes and instructions on how people are staying informed is also being put in place. So making that part of your policy, that at any time there is significant change within staffing and availability of services, that X, Y, and Z is put in place, making that part of your policy just helps with making sure your organization is covered. So now we're going to get into just a couple of general policy purpose examples. It's just a couple of things that you can put in your policy that's real simple, such as this company policy includes measures we are actively taking to mitigate the spread of coronavirus. This is coronavirus specific, but again, we can generalize examples like this to just say to mitigate any type of public health crisis or emergency response. So we can modify the language in order for it to be more generalized as much as possible. So it's just not around COVID. It's around anything that happens around any type of public health scare that happens within our communities. Making sure these are examples of what sick leave arrangement could be, work from home requests could look like, for instance. And this, one of the things that we have, the example that's here is that if someone goes and they travel, it's requiring them to work from home for at least 14 days before they return to the office. Putting that in your policy is important because you want people to know that in order to make sure, because it goes back to your safety procedures, that if you go and you travel, it's important for you to stay at home for 14 days. Putting that in your policy is important because if it's not in your policy, it's just a recommendation or a good idea. It's not a requirement. So therefore, putting it in your policy makes things a lot more formal. Another policy examples around general hygiene rules, traveling and commuting measures. So again, we're going to send out these slides. So if any of those examples stood out to you, and again, if you need any TA training support around looking at your policy and adding some information there, we're more than happy to support you around that. So phase 3, once you get to phase 3 again is assessment of phase 2. So in each phase, it is helpful that you assess the phase prior to make sure that it works. Again, each assessment of each phase should take at least 3 to 4 weeks of assessment. We're at phase 3. We're at a place now where we are pretty much up and running. That remote from work is optional or is standard. It's that we've made working from home a thing that we're going to allow our staff to do because it seems to be a good practice. Remote work is optional. It's not something people have to do at this point. All employees have returned. You're open for walk-ins and off-site service, including housing. You're able to accommodate personally utilizing the readiness assessment. You have a crisis management plan in place. So phase 3 is pretty much, we've worked out all the kinks from phase 1 and phase 2, and now we're pretty much working from a space of business as usual, kind of, sort of. So everything is open. But also that we put in phase 3 is that you are putting a plan in place for possibility of resurgence of the pandemic. Is that you have a plan in place. So right now, we should be at a place where, again, like we just mentioned, your COVID team, that team is more of a standard for your organization, that you have this team in place. Whereas That's part of your plan. So if something else happens, you have a team in place already. They're designated. You have policies in place, or they're at least being drafted at this point. And also, you have really, really looked at the lessons learned. Remember, as we mentioned in phase 2, you have started collecting the data and the stories of everything that has transpired over these course of months of how we dealt with this pandemic in our community. So in phase 3, we should be reflecting on lessons learned and how we need to move forward and things of that nature. So phase 3 is probably next year for a lot of people. It could be next month for some, but for some people it's 6-8 months down the road before we even get to phase 3. So, but the goal is you want to get to phase 3. So we want to make sure that phase 3 is the goal. We don't want to stop at at just phase 1 and phase 2 because we had a lot of hiccups. So phase 3 is completely off the, it's not even a goal anymore. Keep phase 3 because that tells you exactly where you all are trying to get to and exactly what the end result needs to be. So we are getting close to wrapping up, and I wanted to make sure we put the resources that's available to you. I hope everyone knows that we have the Southern Cares Grant that is on our website right now. We hope all of you are applying to the Southern Care Grant. This care grant is specifically for you applying for funds to help offset the expenses that have been acquired from dealing with this pandemic, whether it's to pay for staff, is it to pay for programming, is it help to meet some of the loss of revenue due to cancel of fundraisers and trainings and travel and all that kind of stuff. Does it need to pay for PPE equipment? Do you need to pay for PPE for your staff and for your community? Do you need for food? Do you need to pay for anything? Southern Care Grant would cover all those costs and all those expenses. So therefore, please, please, please apply for that grant if you haven't. It's a low barrier grant. So it's not something where you have to create these long narratives. It is really straightforward. So we encourage you to apply to it. Darren has put the link in the chat box. So please click on that link and access it. If you have questions, please contact us and let us know what your questions are. If you have any questions regarding that, the core grant, our mini grants that are up to $4,500 are open. You can pay for technology. You can pay for, if you still want to do trainings or have consultants that you want to work with your staff, it can pay for that. It can pay for any type of website updates. Right now, the only thing that we're not covering in the core grants is any type of travel to conferences or meetings. So in-person meetings. We're not paying for anything that's in person or travel. But anything else underneath the sun, you can provide for a core grant. If you read the core grant and you feel like what I want is not going to be covered, I don't see how what I'm requesting is going to be covered for the core grant, please contact us and ask us because you never know. Because we have flexibility with the core grant. So it's something there that you feel like what's there doesn't cover what your needs are, ask first before you decide not to apply. So please send us an email, let us know what your thoughts are, and please, please apply to that grant. Like I said, it's up to $4,500. It's really straightforward too. If there's something in your grant that you're missing, we always contact those organizations and ask them to add that they're missing X, Y, and Z for the application. Please add this following information. So we do a lot of TA around you doing those core grants. Again, we do a lot of training, capacity building assistance. Again, if you need help around updating your policies, if you need some help around putting those phases together, working with your staff and getting them back on board, let us know. We do it around capacity building assistance. We do everything around capacity building, everything that keeps your doors open. Board training, so on and so forth. University of Houston does well-being, giving mental health. A lot of folks are dealing with mental health challenges, being trauma-informed during this time. They do a lot of training around that, and then stigma reduction and cultural responsive care through the Southern AIDS Coalition. So all those trainings are free, so please access those as much as possible. You can go on our website in order to apply and put in an application for a training request. And then also we have resources. So these are a lot of resources that we pull together. Again, they'll be sent out with this PowerPoint, all the resources. So we have sample pre-return workplace considerations, one-pagers around telemedicine, unemployment insurance, infographics, a checklist, sample policy templates for welcome back letters, telecommuting checklists. Like we have a lot of those things. So we're going to send those out to you, to folks. If it's something that you're missing, again, if it's anything that you all need, that you need around HR, around your policies, around your procedures, around recruiting. Some people are recruiting instead of hiring folks. If you need help around how to do that, how to onboard new board members, and do all of those things online, let us know. We have consultants that are more than happy to support you. So other than that, that's all I have. And if anyone have any questions, please put those in the chat box. All right. So if anybody has any questions, Chris asks, if we receive funding from Gilead Cares, we are not eligible for the Southern Care Grant, correct? You are eligible, Chris, so apply. You are eligible. You are eligible. Anybody can apply. There are no restrictions. And one reason why is that if you are like, for instance, receiving like a TGP, those monies go for that project that you got funded. The Southern Care Grant is to really go towards all the costs, to deal with offsetting the costs that you all have accrued through because of COVID. And some additional information. That is not true, Chris. If that's not true, Chris. If they got Gilead, Kia just inboxed me. She said if they got Gilead Cares, they cannot get some. Oh, Gilead Cares. I'm sorry, Chris. I thought you meant the Transformative Grant. Gilead Cares is completely different. No, if you got the Gilead Cares, you can't get the Southern Care Grant, so you can't apply. Chris, you did a whoop whoop for absolutely nothing. I am so sorry for getting you excited and then having to let you down at the end. So you have to forgive me, but you know, you charged it to my head and not my heart. I just want you to get as much funding as possible, Chris. So sorry for my over enthusiasm. So other than that, but Chris, you can always apply for a core grant. So if that's up to $4,500, now you can definitely apply for that. So I know you can apply for that. So Chris, if you still need some, okay, great. I'm glad you're working on it. All right, great. That's absolutely awesome. So apply for the core grant and can also, and always get training requests, Chris. So apply for those too. And that is no cost. Okay. Let me see. Is there anything else?
Good afternoon, Delphina. This is Yasmin. Did you say the Gilead Care Grant couldn't apply?
Hey, Yasmin. We're saying if you have the Gilead Cares Grant, if you already have received the Gilead Cares Grant already, you can't apply for the Southern Care Grant.
Okay, you can't. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes. I just make sure I'm writing the same thing I'm hearing.
Okay. Okay. So if you have the Gilead Cares Grant, folks, you can apply for the Southern Care Grant. And Kia, if there is any additional information you want me to share around the CARES grant so people understand and knows and understands everything that the eligibility around the Southern Care Grant, please chime in, or if you can, hop on the webinar, that would be great. We have another question. We would like to add COVID testing to our services, but cannot find funding. Tried our PH department in the state. Any ideas on private funding? So, I wonder if you can apply to, that's a good question. That's a good question, Chris. I think you may be, University of Houston has some funding, a mini grant too, that they do. And they don't have as many restrictions as we do around testing. So that may be an option for you, but let me ask them, the people at University of Houston. And for the folks that's on the call, have you all been able to obtain funding from any other entity around COVID testing, adding COVID testing to your services? Has anybody been able to find a funding channel that allows that to happen? So if anyone on here has found, or I don't know if Leisha is still on the webinar, if anyone has heard of any funding entity that's out there that would provide some additional funds for organizations to add COVID testing to existing services, please put those in the chat. That would be absolutely great. Okay, I'm not seeing anything right now. Okay, all right, I'm not seeing anything right now. So Chris, we will do some research on our end to see if we can find anything, and whatever we find, I'll send it to you. But if anyone, if other folks on the webinar is also interested, and that's also a concern to you all, let us know. So when we find out, we can share that information with everyone. So if we send the information with other folks. Okay. All right, great. All right. Okay, it seems like there's no other questions coming through. All right, so if there's nothing else, we are going to wrap this up. And again, we are going to send this out to everyone that registered, so you can have this as part of your records. If you all want to utilize this PowerPoint for your own, do your own presentation with it, please feel free to utilize the slides and the content, make it your own. It's not even a problem. Okay, all right, so we don't have anything else, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up and say goodbye to everyone, and hope and pray everyone has a great day. Please be safe, take care of yourselves. Thank you all for participating, taking time out of your busy day to participate on the webinar. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us at emory@gileadconference.com, or those of you who have my email, you always shoot me an email directly. Okay, all right, well, thanks and have a great day.